long day, so I'll be as brief as I can. First off, I'd like to say that we all uttered before we had any contact with the demonic. We all uttered beyond politics or saviors or national borders. And language, for me, is our electric connection to the whole universe out there. And it is there, by the way. In fact, recently, there was the revelation, it's true reality that we're part of a supercluster that's 520 million light years across. And the Milky Way is a small part of that supercluster near the edge. And the Earth and the Sun are at the edge of the Milky Way, which is the edge of an edge. And I always ask this question in every meeting. It's a rhetorical situation, not to put anyone on the spot, but where is the Orion Spur? The Orion Spur. The Orion Spur is where we're at right now. This is where the sun is. It's a minor sun, insignificant, and if you're coming from so many light years away, say what our capacities is, we have them today as human beings, we would not be noticed. So where does that put a king or a leader or a ruler or some homicidal faction? It's endless. We read, what's her name? The Distant Mirror was a great book. Barbara Tuchman, 1978, 80, something like that. And the whole idea in the Middle Ages was ridiculous. What happened was that the European situation was so incredibly negative, and it was killing back and forth. And my understanding is that the only innovation out of that period was not the Renaissance, but was the turning of that negative energy onto the so-called New World, into Africa. And this is the world we have today, unfortunately. Stuck on this little cinder out in space. So what do we do with this? We have to find our natural electricity that we have been born with from the cosmos. It's not been superimposed by some technique or being on Facebook or something like that. You know, by the way, if you're a writer, we want you, I say we, but I said, write with your hand. Because you get electricity through that. Everybody's got different handwriting. And it's something to that, instead of pushing it out on the machine. Because, I was talking to a buddy of mine in New York a couple of days back, and we're lamenting the fact that this is about, almost 30 million people between the two cities, and we have to do this long distance contact, and the zombification is overwhelming. Everybody looks down, if you notice, every day people are looking down, and they're in cubby holes. If it's in La Jolla or if it's in South Central where I was born and grew up, it's a whole different thing over there, It swings a different way, but it's still isolated. So in other words, that's why I'm here. You don't want to be locked into borders psychologically or any other way. So that's why you got to expose yourself. And for me, exposure came through listening to African American classical music, which is called jazz music. Which, if you don't have access to that, you're missing a big link. And especially creative people, you got to look at the odyssey of somebody like Ornette Coleman, who's very essential to the LA community, but is not recognized as such because, we'll be honest, it's the melanin content. This is the problem. And, anybody know free jazz? Yeah, we know the free jazz record. That was an LA record. Dolphy was on it, the great Eric Dolphy, Don Cherry from Watts, Billy Higgins from Watts. And the only person who was out there was Freddie Hubbard, who was from Indianapolis, but You know, Scott LaFaro and Charlie Hayden, they were living in LA when they did that record. This is like 1960. Jackson Pollock is on the cover of that record. Try to get it, it's on Atlantic, and you can pick it up somehow. But listen to what they're doing. They're taking chances. They're not looking for formulas. So that's how I learned how to get into myself, not through formality, but through organicity. And we know trees don't go from the top down, they come from the bottom up. They spring out of the invisible. People spring out of the invisible. We're analogous to that, to nature. We are nature. And somehow the oxygen has created this bifurcation about nature and energy. You go back to Naeem Akbar talks about the West having these incredible technological advances. But it's a problem because we really can't use the technology. Can we use the atom bomb? All that drama, you know, with what's his name, Oppenheimer, all about exterminating the human race. You know, someone was talking about the 1,000-year trauma that happened 1,000 years ago, about the apocalypse. And they said that's just natural. But this time it really is true, because this is the only civilization that is capable of wiping out everybody. The Romans probably would have did it too if they'd have had it with that mentality. They're blockheads. But the fact is that they didn't get the opportunity to do it. The Americans have gotten a chance to do this. And a very rapacious background we've come from in this society. Violent and duplicitous, unfortunately. And this is the human race, but this in particular is a problem, because this one says it was designed to free. But it started off as an enslaved situation and has remained one. And everybody is working around these parameters in their mind. So I think the poet has a chance to open and cross borders, not only on this zone, but like the people in Mali, the old ancients in Mali, cross across the borders and evaporate into the atmosphere. They were doing telepathy and movement beyond the body, you know, before the West was born. And they talk about the Egyptian movement with Mars in Egypt. Well, that's possible, you know, because Swallow the Lubitz talks about the invisible mathematics in the great Temple of Luxor. The Temple of Man, that big book, that's a book that you just kind of do little inch at a time. It took about 40 years to get that book. So what I'm interested in is crossing zones with nature, my own nature via language. It's the only thing I have. You know, I didn't grow up with any books in the house. I write books, but I had no books. And grew up as a gym rat, you know, ball. So, you know, I wasn't I wasn't one of these precocious little 7-year-olds, you know, playing chess and stuff like that. I wasn't like Magnus Carlsen. Anybody know Magnus Carlsen, by the way? That's something you should know too. A world championship of chess is going on right now in Sochi in Russia. Anand versus Carlsen. You know, it's quite interesting. But anyway, that's a sidebar. But I'm going to read a poem called The Blood Penguin. And this is a larger penguin. It's in the penguin's voice because there was more oxygen earlier on. Things grew larger, of course. So these penguins were 6 foot. And he's going to speak. He says, I am the carnivore, the hounded night walker, searching for my wings scattered under glass. They claim I should return to monomial transfixing, to exhibit A and no further. To some, I am 6 foot and lizard. To others, I am considered a mange lamb returned from the tropics. I am never given due as to sum or proportion. I am seen as the source of something leprous, as no longer the motive of who I was thought I was shaped to be. I who live as mislaid damage, as part of pointless verbal ejecta, There are no nouns to ensnare me, to fish up my blood so as to summon consensus. I am never that condition within the fire of conjoinment. I am never to be the human boy genius, the archivist, the bartered child contending with study. I am none of the above, none of the aforesaid compendiums. I am the animus, the vertical lion tundra, the diamond bird who burrows under snow. Because of my leaning, I know the stark Egyptian soma, much as would a blinded cemetery scribe. And because I understand one's basic neural unravelment, I am seen as piacular, as specter, as both standing and freezing, being of some other form from some other planet. As clinical morae addendum, this contains in itself blackened scrawled marks from Moravia, from squandered quanta, from the Sunda Islands, from quaking fogs from Santiago. They say I suffer from powerful, deafening eye resistance, my eyes wild and inferocious with lapses. The attention span blunted, the astrological paralysis shifted. So they say the unknown is the trigonomic, is the transcendent nucleus, the born equational spell, according to the flaws in universal summoning. I am ancient pantomime who cannot grasp, who cannot transgress his inherited Landino. As to Mayan glyphs and squares, I am plummeted. I am simply without the means to conduct my own prism, to take on the culpable mean at circumstantial limit. I exist through negated practical limit, through parallel sub-clauses, without knowing the desire to seek the enzymes of living. I am without and without and without. I who create doubt and the genetics of perpetual conflict, I could be strange as a human half-rock who poses himself as Hilario Pazuelos. And what is claimed against me is not unreasoned, is not the treatise of post-fanatics. Instead, it is a curious treatise on circumstantial exhibit. It says my values are possessed by distance, like someone humbled or plagued by a treaty. My dispossessed senses, described by these methods under the forms of the treasonous, it tells me I am lifeless blood equipment, that my genes are not useful, that my mind is simply stricken or exposed. Yet such a chronicle loses its spores in the glaciers. It says I am of Africa and the sea coast, of Ghana and the Seychelles, of insular breakage near the Azores. Yet it states my non-placement, my cavern, my debilitating refuge, not even a dwelling beneath the stars as etheric camp base on Saturn. Such is the ether climb, the sub-revelation as dialectical cartography, conjoining with the ocelots swimming across the prisms of Mauritius, or simple flat land in Manchuria. These are seen as soils no known warrior can claim. Because I readily announce my resistance by tone as carnivorous psychic sparring, wandering beyond pervasive death concussives, claimed by genetic dyslogistics, by anarchic ruin, by Jurassic sibling cirrhosis. I cannot describe by cursory enclosure external motivation or any rotary or back-flowing water attainment. It is described as simulacra, as ghost data, as hibernation through pillage, non-specific, post-necrotic, partaking in part as jonquil and longevity. Of course, the cells blaze, infinity evolves, the monsoons project through containment, yet nothing resolves, nothing forbears, and is clement. I exist as steep electrical ice, asking of myself spells of pointless dominating fuels. Within this agnostic current, I describe myself as one who's hellish, who's buried his weight with a double insistence, who seems to sleep in a brazen cylinder of peril. Then, after a pause in listening, calling myself the blood penguin, embraced by squalls, by an oily and misshapen blinding. You know, poetry for me is magic, and for me, I never let the cognitive intrude too much. You know, some of you may not do a lot of writing, and so you know, to get that much done, you can't looking outside of yourself too much. I don't look outside of myself too much. That doesn't preclude the fact that one needs to read books and be accurate with language, because language is magical, and so it has to be accurate down to the phoneme, down to the particles. You can't just anything put on the page. And so it comes from the experience of living, not from some kind of abstracted study. And I think that's too much writing is foregrounded by too much study, you know, too much posturing that way. You know, if it's down, if not right, just let it go. Just go for it. Just go for it. Don't worry about it. You know, I was real sick recently, some years ago. And, you know, Diane, she visited me, she was there in the hospital. I was almost out of here. But I wasn't, you know, I just relaxed. It was a random Thursday afternoon, so why worry about it? Don't worry about the universe. Don't worry about there's some savior coming to get you. You know, that's a problem, you know. You have this big master, Jesus Christ, hanging over everybody. You know, he's been conditioned as some kind of gatekeeper. And you hear that name, boy, it sends up a bunch of shivers, you know. And it's been a problem in this planet, because it's not liberated people, but it's imprisoned them psychologically. And especially with the language, you know, the language is flat. It wants to describe things, you know, you get an evangelist coming up to you. That is not imaginative language. He's coercing you. Savonarola. You see what happened to Savonarola. This is an audience who would know Savonarola. I'm going to just do this one here. Writing for me is just listening and listening and listening. As Jen was talking about, listening. It's not the eye, but it's always the ear. Breton said it to Blake. You know, anybody knows something about the salt of this work. You got to listen to. You can't see it. You got to listen to it. It's got to speak somehow. Under and beyond all the conditioning that you've been forced to go through. And I'm going to read this poem. It's a title piece from this book called Above the Human Nerve Domain. To unlock predispositives in carbon, to cancel sleep as poetical drachma, not as transaxial summa or intense aboriginal invasive, but as promenade, as forgery by craft, as soiled aboriginal anagram. Yes, as a dark stochastic wheat drained of its magic as drift, being boundary, being hellish intervention as grasp. I'm thinking of aroused electrical blockage, of human monsoon killing as treaty, as breach, as strangle impulse by identity. I mean the psychic root which is stained by dialectical illness, by the thought contained in black ozonal mirrors, where general slaughter is reflected, where the mind impels its wits by bleak molecular isolation, by stunted mangrove withdrawal, by absence from the life of euphoric solar trees. Such prone negation imploded from the realms of a suicide foundry, of broken wisdom as diamond. It is an eon of fallen snow in a well, an injudicious barrier gone awry, the ingrained Eurocentric example of the hatred of the darker integument with its combative belligerence against the core of relational mystery. So what concerns me is a yoga which implodes the sun, which compounds its runics, the body then electric like a stunning sapphire serpent, with the arc of its cells alive as interior alter species, as an eye of analogical waters. No longer of ennui, of the praxis of perfidious helium atrocity, extended by the vapor of betrayal, by the dazed and perceptives in the molecules. Here, in such preternatural enclave, I swim in the murmur of sundogs, of kindled potentate spasms, like interior distillation from Moorish pre-Copernica. As if At the height of Kemetic day, there existed the dauntless Sphinxian geometries, those pre-existed personas of lightning, no longer of the form of gravity as bastion, of lingering ammonia in the genes, but of absent chemical flaw, the body becoming the magic flight of a transmuted corium, of the bell of a bloodless liminal amber. As if under the camouflage of cataracts I were to dwell on glassy vertigo soils, compelled by roaring anodyne volcanoes, every reason exists to impose my scrolls on blank omega warrens. Therefore, being able to breathe at living relational scale, life as spurious mirror must be empty, must transcend the flaw in piacular bullocks, so that the bulk, the monorons, the chasms will emit as oracular bounty, assault, a distance prince, capable of a lapse at the pitch of the transmuted ozone body. It's an interesting book because I want, you know, all of the books that people have, mostly males, sign the blurbs. This one, I was happy to just, two of the ladies that signed are in the room. Diane and Harryette. And, you know, all ladies. You know, because we gotta, you know, cross these boundaries, as I was saying before. You know, the color boundary on the cinder, remember, you know, in this wild, crazy cosmos. You know, if something catches my eye in odd little moments, you know, I'll read a paper. Like when once in a while I'll do teach a course or something. And I always have students get an LA or New York Times on the weekend. Don't get the online journal, get the paper and turn the pages so you can feel it. Because, you know, we lost a sense of the tactility, you know, we become like sallow and too precious. Just turn the pages and start reading it. But, you know, there's a lot of plays in there, you know, a lot of interesting things that sparks the mind. So I was reading this article about the comet, you know, the other day. They just landed on the comet, and they said that the atmosphere is so haunted out there. It's dark and haunted. Most of the universe is completely dark. What is this thing? Rather than looking down, we should be looking up as to what we are about. We are a mystery. We have a social security number and an identity by some country or something like that. But what is that? You know, it's just like you got to throw it out there. It's like Montaigne just do this work out, you know, before Shakespeare, and it still resonates. Incredible writing, by the way. I'm going to not go too long, but one of the things I've been interested in doing is collaborations. And, you know, not just working with the author, like Wertheim was talking about with Suppos, and, you know, the magnetic fields, which was 1919, 100 years ago now. And very few people have been taking up these collective efforts. I was happy to do this project with my good friend Janice Lee, who most of you in this room know. And we did this book called The Transparent as Witness, and it was like a very smooth flow. I mean, it was like to the point where when we went over the copy, it was so clean. We didn't know who wrote what. And there was no worries about it. So this is the way we want to handle it. I'm just going to read a passage here that we wrote, and we did this book spontaneously. Alchemy according to Riddle, seemingly standing as a transfixed vertical apparition. This being the lightning which crawls through the nerves, which tends to burn as spots in the vision. This being core as powerful kinetic as latitudinal ether, analogous to mountains burning, charged by interior turning. This being the first hermetic seizure, a sun warren where the soul accelerates and experiments with itself through motionless motion. This being the source of closed eyes, of the extra red node through osmosis, the touch which can claim the horsehead nebula as its vision. This being the rhetoric of the unsummoned, of the suddenly applicable brought into being, alien instigation, the verbal as profile of that which is impossible to know, this being the action of non-conclusion, the point blank as other, the rupture which swoons as exponential osmotics. This ability to work with the mystery via language is most accelerated for me right now because, you know, at a certain point you know that you're passing into the cosmos and that December 13th, 1999 is not coming back. It really isn't. And increasingly, you know, people around the earth know that. In fact, in more challenged environments, you know, 5-year-olds know it now, because they're getting killed by greater light, all parts of the world. So this is a praxis that I was like turned into through Roger Gilbert LeCompte, who actually put his body on the line to go out into the mystery, to take over. You know, he did the carbon tetrachloride, you know, blew the lungs out, but shot the heroin, but it was just having the guts to go out into the cosmos. I'm not saying you should shoot up heroin, but you should go into, you know, to go into this other expanse via language, and it's very inspirational. This group, they call it the big game, the grand game. I call it the grand game. They call it the Grand Jeu, with René Demal and Roger Gilbert LeCompte and Robert Mayrat. There was one other, I can't remember the other one's name. There was 4 of them, and they were ahead of the surrealists. In 1922, they had already done automatic writing, 2 years before Breton came out with the first manifesto. And when Breton tried to coerce them to come into the surrealist movement, along with René Guénon, they said, we already did this. So that's why we don't hear about them too much. But, you know, Artaud was good friends with LeCompte. And these people they wouldn't fit very well in conference rooms. No way. You know, it's a street culture. And you find that street culture, you know, coming up in the African-American classical music. Because, you know, of course, when all this was happening in the 1940s, when Bird came out, I mean, you know, America was completely apartheid. So you had to play in certain rooms, and it was a struggle. But gold came out of that. And so what I've done in growing up, before I was reading or writing, I was in rooms, me and my boys would lock up all weekend and turn on the records and just go into, just drown ourselves in train and talk about Dolphy. You know, the music is so powerful that you don't have to worry about, there's no time there. Let's talk about Montaigne or Dolphy or whoever who's gone on, seemingly gone on, but the work is there 50 years, 500 years. That's the essence of what you want to get to. It's transpersonal, not to be worried about personality that way. And once you can get beyond the personality and what I did, and you become so much freer with what you can do with your life. You don't have to worry about what somebody's going to say. And that was, you know, that illness, I was already like that, but it just reaffirmed that. It's nothing out there. As Philip Lamartine told me, it's nothing out there, man. All these guys hanging these dangling things over there, get it. It's too cute and too prissy. What we're going to do is read a couple more. And it's been a long day, so I won't stay too long.
Well, actually, I think you're kind of out of time because we.
Well, okay, I'm sorry about that. I won't go any further. So we'll leave it at that. But look, this is a book. If I can get your emails, these 2 books are like being printed right now. This is a handmade book coming out of white print ink. And this one is a collaboration I did with Byron Baker, a great visual artist. And if you put your emails down, we can get some to you. And if you want a couple books, I got a couple things over there. Thank you for that.